Vladimir Putin's secret fleet has long been hiding in the shadows, slipping silently through waters beyond the reach of law. For years, this floating ghost ship army evaded detection, sidestepped sanctions, and secretly funneled billions directly into Kremlin coffers. Putin believed those rusted-out tankers, often carrying oil, were invincible, untouchable even in icy Scandinavian waters. Perhaps it was this confidence that turned each vessel into floating fortresses, complete with armed personnel and even mounted soldiers. To the outside world, they seemed just cargo ships. But behind the scenes, these were tactical military outposts, threatening global stability. Then, everything changed in a heartbeat. On the cold morning of December 20th, at the edge of Swedish waters, a shocking event shattered the Kremlin's illusion of impunity. A Russian cargo vessel, the Adler, suddenly lost power and began to drift aimlessly. What might have looked like a routine engine failure quickly revealed itself as far more. As the massive 126-meter-long ship coasted uncontrollably, it became a potential battleground. The Adler anchored near the Kullaberg Peninsula, a strategic point on Sweden's southwestern coast. At first glance, it could have been merely a maritime accident. But Swedish officials saw an opportunity. Under the cover of night, they made their move. Specially authorized by the prosecutor's office, Swedish customs, Coast Guard, and police stormed aboard. What they uncovered was shocking. Not just a malfunction, this was a window into the shadowy depths of Russian logistics. Evidence pointed to violations of arms export laws, hidden cargo from third countries, and a network operating well beyond legal boundaries. This was just the surface. Western intelligence soon confirmed that the Adler belonged to a company blacklisted by the US and EU, a company suspected of smuggling ammunition from North Korea to Russia. This vessel was part of a covert supply chain supporting Russian artillery forces in Ukraine, traveling in the darkness of secrecy. Its destination was unknown, another hallmark tactic of the Shadow Fleet's stealth operations. But the true alarm bells rang when investigators uncovered more. The fleet was no longer a simple line of oil tankers. These ships had been militarized. Swedish Navy Chief Marko Petkovic revealed that many now carried military personnel and armed guards, in fake crew positions, but none involved in operational tasks. Intelligence sources confirmed an even darker reality: many of these armed groups are linked to private military companies or even Russian army units. The fleet, over 1,100 ships strong, had evolved from civilian trade to a hybrid battlefield, capable of surveillance, cyber attack, and even launching drones. These vessels, fragile and uninspected, are referred to as zombie ships, uninsured and neglected, a ticking time bomb in the Baltic. The engine failure of the Adler was no accident. It was a symptom of a system rotting from within, decayed and vulnerable. Russia's aim was to create a clandestine maritime network worth $10 billion, circumvent Western laws, and operate in the shadows. But in the process, they exposed their own vulnerability. That rusty fleet, once unseen, now exposed, is Russia's Achilles heel. Sweden's daring interception was more than a maritime arrest, it was the opening move in a high-stakes chess match beneath the waves. The Nordic Navy is engaged in a relentless game of hide-and-seek with Russian submarines lurking near NATO waters. According to Swedish officials, underwater activity now hits unprecedented levels, rivaling Cold War tensions. These silent killers, the Kilo-class submarines, are designed for stealth, capable of striking NATO supply lines, monitoring undersea cables, and sabotaging critical infrastructure. Almost weekly, Swedish forces detect these submarines, hinting at a mass modernizing effort by Russia in the Baltic. Should conflict ignite in Ukraine, experts warn Russia will shift its focus entirely to the Baltic Sea. The number of submarines will multiply, aiming to threaten NATO's defenses. Meanwhile, Sweden refuses to stay on the sidelines. Through joint exercises with NATO allies like Germany, France, and the US, Scandinavian countries are building an invisible wall of sensors and patrols. At the heart of this confrontation is Gotland Island. Once a peaceful tourist destination, it's now a fortress, sitting just 300 kilometers from Kaliningrad. Its strategic position offers control over all Baltic Sea traffic and airspace, a vital asset in any conflict. From here, Swedish and Polish allies deploy advanced missile systems, turning this small island into a formidable military outpost. Swedish Defense Chief Eva Skog Haslam explains. Deploying missile units on Gotland secures almost the entire Baltic region. For Russia, this is a nightmare scenario. Every Russian vessel parked in the Baltic is now a target. Every heartbeat, every radar pulse, echoes with the threat of swift NATO retaliation. Sweden's seizure of the Adler was not just a maritime operation. It was a clear message: the era of tacit, shadowy navigation in these waters is over. Every piece of logistics, every illicit cargo, and every covert ship can and will be challenged. The Baltic Sea is becoming a battlefield of intelligence, technology, and nerve. But the stakes are even higher. Sweden is preparing for the possibility of striking deep into Russia itself. Its armed forces are pushing for long-range missile capabilities, furthest of all, targeting strategic centers thousands of kilometers inside Russia. These weapons could hit factories, command hubs, and key military sites, turning the tide of power in the region. The strategic goal? To transform Sweden from a passive defender into an offensive player capable of threatening Russian dominance. This means turning the Baltic into a no-man's land, a zone where every vessel, submarine, and drone is a potential challenge. NATO's Arctic allies, including the United States, Canada, Norway, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland, are uniting to dominate the High North. Finland's military spending is soaring by 75%, and Sweden is boosting its forces by a staggering 88%, building new icebreakers and infrastructure. Their mission: to curb Russia's claims over the Arctic and secure control over vital shipping routes. With this growing military front, Russia's old claim to Arctic mastery is crumbling. The new Cold War is icy, relentless, and unforgiving. The question remains: how long can Russia hold its shadow fleet together when the tide of the North is turning against it? Initially dismissed as a routine maritime malfunction, the drifting of the cargo vessel Adler created an opening for Sweden's unexpected intervention. But this was no ordinary accident. Under the cover of night, with the quiet hum of engines and the salty scents swirling in the cold air, Swedish forces acted swiftly, permitted only by a direct order from the prosecutor's office. Their mission? To uncover hidden threats lurking beneath the ship's battered exterior. The ship's legal status was clear. Suspicion of arms export violations hung fiercely in the air. Swedish authorities boarded the vessel, casting a piercing gaze over every inch. What they found surpassed any preliminary expectations. Beyond the malfunction, evidence of an intricate, clandestine logistics web emerged. This was a warning sign, a signal of the shadowy arms that cut across international waters. Why was such a high-profile raid necessary? The vessel belonged to Umleasing LLC, more than just a shell company. It was blacklisted by the US and European Union for a reason. Western intelligence had long suspected these ships of smuggling ammunition from North Korea into Russia. They were part of a network fueling artillery on the front lines of conflict in Ukraine. The destination of this ship? Still veiled in secrecy. Its route from St. Petersburg had been cloaked in darkness, a typical tactic of the Shadow Fleet. But then, something startling was uncovered. Swedish officials discovered cargo from foreign nations, goods that shouldn't have been there. The investigation expanded rapidly. What seemed like a simple ship inspection turned into a discovery of a much larger puzzle. This event was only the beginning. Evidence surfaced confirming that Russia's fleet wasn't just rusty tankers carrying oil. It was evolving into something far more dangerous. Military personnel now appeared aboard these vessels. Armed, uniformed, ready for combat, hidden in the shadows of oil tankers that plied their route across the Baltic. The once ignored vessels had become mobile military assets, capable of launching threats from the depths of the sea. Could you imagine such a clandestine network? A fleet so decayed yet so deadly. This wasn't just smuggling. It was a covert war being fought in the quiet corridors of the ocean. The quiet hum of the engines masked a dangerous truth, one that could shift the balance of power on the edge of conflict. Previous part, translated and rephrased: the situation with the Adler seemed like a typical maritime accident, something easily brushed aside as a technical failure. But for the Swedish authorities, it was a gift, an opportunity to strike. On December 21, in the dead of night, with permission from the prosecutor, Swedish Customs, Coast Guard, and police stormed the vessel. They found more than just a broken engine. Evidence of Russia's secret logistics was right there. The vessel belonged to Leasing LLC, a company under blacklisting by the US and European Union. Western reports accuse these ships of ferrying ammunition from North Korea to Russia, fueling conflict in Ukraine. The ship's exact destination remained a mystery, a signature tactic of the Shadow Fleet, which operates in the dark. But how? The authorities also uncovered foreign goods on board, prompting a deeper investigation. This wasn't an ordinary maritime dilemma, it was the tip of an iceberg, evidence confirming that Russia's fleet had morphed into a formidable military force. Swedish Navy sources confirmed that the ships now carried personnel in military uniforms, armed with weapons, more than just oil tankers, but active combat vessels hidden in plain sight. The Russian Shadow Fleet is no longer just a collection of aging tankers drifting aimlessly across the Baltic Sea. These ships have been transformed into potent military tools, cloaked in secrecy. Sources confirm that many now host personnel dressed in military uniforms, armed with weapons, and on official crew lists as just civilian workers. Imagine being aboard one of these ships, the creaking of rusted hulls, the salty smell of the sea mixing with unidentifiable chemicals lurking in the air. Beneath the surface, these vessels are not just transporting oil, they serve as mobile military bases, monitoring vital undersea cables, observing NATO drills, and launching surveillance drones. Dubbed zombie ships, they are uninsured, unmaintained, completely outside international control, time bombs silently waiting in the deep. According to intelligence, these armed groups are either mercenaries affiliated with private military companies or active Russian personnel, posing as security firms. Their mission? To threaten supply lines across NATO and to target undersea infrastructure. These ships are no longer civilian trade vessels, they are instruments of hybrid warfare, blending covert logistics with potential military strikes. This situation strips away any pretense of normalcy. Over 1,100 ships hiding in the Baltic, representing Russia's clandestine fleet. Their deathly decay is no accident. The recent engine failure of the Adler ship was no coincidence but the inevitable sign of systematic neglect. Russia invested nearly $10 billion creating this parallel network, trying to bypass Western maritime laws. Yet, in doing so, they made their logistics utterly vulnerable. What did Sweden do? They seized a rotten link, disrupting this entire hidden empire. But is this simply a maritime incident? Or part of a far darker game? Beneath the waves, shadowy battles are unfolding, silent submarines darting through the depths, ready to strike. Swedish officials report almost weekly detections of Russian submarines and activity unseen since the Cold War's peak. Russia's Baltic fleet is rapidly modernizing, deploying new Kilo-class submarines from shipyards in St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad. These underwater vessels are silent predators designed to threaten NATO's critical underwater infrastructure and scramble military communications. With each new sub, the threat grows more real and more dangerous. But the question remains, how far will this covert war go? Can Sweden and NATO finally shift the tide in this hidden battlefield? And as Russian submarines lurk beneath the icy Baltic waters, a shocking revelation emerges: the battle for control over the Baltic is only intensifying, with each move bringing the world closer to a deeper, unseen conflict. The stakes have never been higher. Who will win in this deadly underwater chess match? Can you imagine being hunted in the depths, where silence is your only ally, yet every bubble and vibration betrays you? Russian subs are prowling closer than ever, transforming the Baltic into a silent battlefield. Swedish officials report spotting one nearly weekly. What's the endgame here? 348 characters. Building on that, Swedish forces now track Russian submarines almost daily, a Cold War echo rumbling back to life. Russia ramps up its Baltic fleet with fresh Kilo-class subs emerging from St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad shipyards. The steel hulls creak under the weight of secrets, cool water lapping against reinforced flanks that hide deadly payloads. What do these silent predators truly crave? Threatening NATO's vital supply lines, targeting underwater cables and pipelines that pulse with our world's lifelines. Feel the taut cables straining beneath the waves, a lifeline that's one torpedo away from chaos. Swedish experts warn darkly, if Ukraine's war pauses, Russia will flood the Baltic with even more subs. Picture the icy grip tightening, numbers exploding like cracks in thawing ice. But Sweden won't just watch. They're fighting back through massive NATO drills, like Playbook Merlin 25, weaving a web of sensors to stalk those subs. Partners like Germany, France, and the US join the hunt, boots crunching on frozen decks, radars humming like angry bees seeking threats below. At the heart of this tension lies Gotland Island, no longer a sunny retreat but a fortress rising from the Baltic's grey embrace. Swedish and Polish leaders call it an unsinkable carrier, bristling with might. 300 kilometers from Kaliningrad, it's the linchpin controlling every wave and wing beat across the sea. Without it, NATO's reinforcements to Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? Unthinkable. Gotland's winds howl with urgency, sands gritty under feet during rapid arming. Missiles like RBS-15 and air defenses lock in, shrinking Russia's freedom alarmingly. As Chief Eva Skog-Haslem of the Swedish Navy declares, deploy on Gotland, and the Baltic's yours. Russia's nightmare? Absolute loss of shadow. The gray zones crumble. Adler's era ends, free passes for ghost fleets are gone. Every Russian vessel now dances in Gotland's crosshairs, radars pinging like warning bells, missiles poised. Joint Polish-Swedish exercises roar over Gotland, emphasizing the truth in thunderous flight. This sea belongs to us now. What happens when Russia's chains snap, revealing their true vulnerability in the depths? Will the Baltic's cold waters turn red with unseen clashes? 1484 words. The era when Russian shadow ships, like the Adler, could freely traverse the gray zones of international waters has come to an abrupt end. Now, every single vessel operates under the watchful eyes of NATO radar systems on Gotland. These ships are no longer just vessels, they are targets, on the brink of destruction. How did this shift happen so fast? The joint patrols by Polish and Swedish forces send a clear message: this sea is no longer Russia's playground. Swedish forces proved their strength with the dramatic seizure of the Adler ship. This operation wasn't just a strike, it was a warning. If any disruption occurs in logistics, it triggers a domino cascade. Ships will be seized. Cargo confiscated. NATO's grip tightens around Russia's covert operations, no exceptions. But Stockholm isn't stopping at defensive tactics. They're rewriting the rules of engagement entirely. Imagine the sound of missile launchers humming to life. Cruise missiles with a range of 2,000 kilometers are requested by Swedish generals. Just think about that distance, twice the length from Stockholm to Moscow. These missiles could strike deep into Russian territory, factories, command centers, anything vital to the Kremlin's survival. Defense Minister Paul Johnson emphasizes this move is about deterrence, making Russia think twice before risking an escalation. Sweden already has Taurus missiles with a range of 500 kilometers mounted on fighter jets, a formidable but regional upgrade. Now, extending that reach to 2,000 kilometers would turn the nation into a global threat, a force capable of striking at Russia's core. Suddenly, Russia, once dominant in the Baltic, finds itself vulnerable, pushed into the role of the threatened. This isn't just about missiles, it's chess on a larger board. It's part of a grand encirclement in the north, led by NATO's Arctic 7 coalition. The alliance includes the US, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland. Finland is boosting military spending by 75%. Sweden, reacting fiercely, is scaling up its military force at an unprecedented rate, an 88% increase since the Cold War. All these moves point to one unthinkable reality: the Arctic, once Russia's backyard, is slipping out of its grasp. The new Cold War in the north is shaping up into a battle of bones, strategic, silent, and deadly. Will Russia respond to this encirclement? Or will it be forced to retreat, cornered by opponents every step of the way? The United Alliance of Arctic Nations, US, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland, stands firm against Russia's ambitions. Their goal is clear: challenge Moscow's claim to dominate the Arctic by jointly developing advanced icebreaker ships through a groundbreaking project. This marks the end of Russia's long-held dream that the Arctic was its exclusive domain. As these northern powers tighten their grip, Moscow's influence begins to falter. Meanwhile, across the globe, the US is bolstering its defenses by deploying powerful HIMARS missile batteries to Shemya Island in Alaska. These cutting-edge systems secure vital Pacific access points, while Finland and Sweden fortify their Baltic borders. The scene is set for a strategic showdown. What might seem like a minor tactical move, Sweden's operation against the Adler ship, could instead ignite a blood-red line along NATO's northern border. This is no longer just a maritime incident, it's a calculated strike signaling that NATO's united front is prepared to enforce legal sovereignty with relentless resolve. The shadowy Russian fleet, once drifting aimlessly with oil transports, now faces a formidable obstacle. No longer just storms, engine failures, or random mishaps, these vessels confront a new reality, a mounting military and legal barrier erected by NATO's reinforced presence. The question is, who will come to Moscow's aid? Enter China, a player whose interest is no longer purely diplomatic or alliance-driven. For Beijing, controlling the Arctic region isn't just about strategic presence. It's about survival, protecting vital trade routes, energy supplies, and geopolitical influence as the region becomes a battleground. For China, the looming encirclement of Russia's western border isn't a mere geopolitical concern. It's a golden opportunity. As NATO nations solidify their positions and impose a tight grip with the construction of icebreakers and military bases, Beijing's focus sharpens on establishing dominance in the Arctic. The Chinese leadership sees the Arctic not just as a distant frontier but as a critical corridor for energy and commerce, an ice silk road to rival the ancient trade routes. They've positioned themselves as near-Arctic stakeholders, eager to carve out a new sphere of influence. This crisis isn't just a tug-of-war over waters or ships. It's a battle for control of the world's northern frontier, a silent, icy war that could redefine geopolitical power for decades to come. As Moscow reels from the collapse of its shadow fleet and the Arctic's new alliances tighten, the question remains, will Beijing step in to fill the void, or will the entire region plunge into chaos? One thing is certain, the North has become the new frontier of global power, and the stakes have never been higher. The fact that a radar system on a Russian-commanded vessel runs on Chinese software raises a troubling question: who truly controls this ship? Could this be the beginning of the Kremlin losing its military independence? More critically, as NATO's influence expands in the Baltic region, the Northern Sea Route becomes an essential corridor for Chinese commerce. If countries like Sweden and Poland block the Baltic exit, Russian oil and Chinese goods will be forced to reroute around the Arctic, a treacherous, icy pathway that could jeopardize global trade. Now, the United States is watching. Strengthening its military presence in Alaska and deploying advanced long-range sensors in the region transforms the Bering Strait into a potential choke point. When Putin considers breaking free from the Baltic trap and heads north, he faces formidable U.S. naval dominance and harsh, unforgiving geography. China's strategy seems to be to use Russia as a shield, advancing its own interests behind Moscow's struggling defenses. Beijing's quiet stance over Sweden's seizure of the Adler ship signals a delicate game, supporting Russia without severing ties with the West. But the fragile balance teeters on chaos. If the collapsing shadow fleet disrupts energy flows that China relies on, pearl-like chunks of Russian oil and resources, Beijing's stance could turn hostile. This could spark a regional crisis, spiraling into a trade war or even into direct military confrontation. China's expanding influence in the Arctic is no longer just economic, it's a stark sign that global power is shifting northward. Russia no longer stands as a superpower. Under pressure, Putin finds himself squeezed between China's growing ambitions and NATO's formidable wall. Its resources are exploited, its independence waning. Every move in the Baltic confines Russia further, reducing it to a subordinate partner caught in a complex chess match with China and the West. Sweden's fierce militarization of Gotland seals Moscow's last lifeline, its strategic position now at the mercy of Beijing's interests. The Kremlin's options are shrinking rapidly, locked between rising global powers and icy waters that challenge every step they take. Will Russia's shadow game finally collapse under the weight of these mounting pressures? This might be one of the most startling ironies in modern geopolitics. A nation embarks on a campaign to push back NATO's influence, yet in doing so, it gradually loses its own territory, its Arctic and Baltic domains slipping into the hands of its eastern rival. Russia's sovereignty is quietly eroding, handed over piece by piece. The war's focus isn't just ships and troops anymore, it's about the very future of Russia's independence. The map is shifting, borders fading, and new power lines are being drawn. Every move made by Sweden, every tightening of NATO's grip, pushes Russia further from its historic borders. The Kremlin's fortress is shrinking, while its future becomes uncertain, more distant, more fragile, every day. What do you think this means for the world? Is Russia truly losing its fight? Or is this a cunning strategy to remain relevant? Share your thoughts. Your voice matters in this unfolding chess game. This story isn't over, it's only just beginning. In the last part, we saw Moscow struggling under NATO's tightening grip in the Baltic, diving headfirst into a perilous alliance with Beijing. Far from trapping Putin, this chaos might just unlock China's Arctic ambitions, painting the North as their playground through the Silk Road on ice. Imagine a frosty dawn in the Bering Sea, where the salt spray stings your skin and the hum of joint patrols echoes across icy waves. Russia's Baltic mess wasn't just a setback, it was a masterstroke pushing the Kremlin toward Beijing's outstretched hand. Could this be Moscow's desperate gamble, fleeing Western sanctions only to fall into the economic whirlpool of the East? What price would Putin pay for this lifeline? The answer lies in Russia's northern shores, where sovereignty crumbles like melting ice under Chinese icebreakers and companies. Did you know satellite ice caught a shocking detail, a radar system on a Russian admiral's ship, humming with Chinese code? Who really commands that vessel, Kremlin or Beijing? This shadow play hints at Russia's military spine bending, its independence fraying thread by thread. Picture the chill of urgent whispers in Moscow's halls, the metallic clang of failing ships blending with the distant roar of unfamiliar tech. Sweden's bold grab of the Adler tanker exposed Russia's rotting fleet, but that was merely the surface ripple. Beneath the waves, in the abyss of the Arctic, a silent battle unfolds among nuclear titans, where thawing ice unveils routes laced with danger. Is NATO's Arctic 7 alliance united fronts from the US, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland crafted to shatter this Sino-Russian bond? Absolutely, erecting a barrier from the Bering Strait to the Norwegian Sea. Yet, here's the unexpected twist: Russia's decrepit zombie ships are getting a lifeline, rigged with China's cutting-edge radars, satellite links, and drone swarms. Western spies call it borderline deadly aid, restoring vision to blinded eyes. But at what cost does this alliance form? Feel the electric tension in the air, the acrid scent of machinery mixing with the crisp bite of Arctic wind. As Russia dodges Western traps, it risks enslaving its armed forces to Chinese tech, the nervous system of its army pulsing on foreign circuits. Who truly leads in this dance, Putin, pleading for aid, or Xi, wielding the strings? Intelligence whispers of growing sights, Chinese vessels shadowing Russian counterparts in the deep Arctic, not just guarding fishermen but charting seabed secrets, probing NATO's underwater webs, stockpiling maps for covert strikes. This partnership isn't friendship, it's a double-edged sword, sharpening Moscow's fangs while dulling its own edge. Could the Adler raid ignite a chain reaction, exposing how China's tech infusion makes Russia's fleet a puppet on borrowed strings? The question hangs heavy: in this icy standoff, who will emerge as the true Arctic master? Russia's struggles in the Baltic are pushing the Kremlin into a dangerous alliance. As Moscow retreats from Western influence, it faces the risk of losing its northern independence altogether. China's growing control over Arctic trade routes and energy corridors is no longer a distant threat, it's happening now. Satellite images reveal increasing joint patrols between Chinese and Russian naval forces across the Bering Sea and Arctic waters. These vessels aren't just fishing or patrolling, they are mapping the ocean floor, probing NATO's underwater defenses, and collecting intelligence for future conflicts. The recent raid on the Adler ship? Just a warning shot. The true battleground is shifting to the icy, melting frontiers where new shipping routes emerge amidst rising tensions. NATO's formation of the Arctic 7 is a bold move to break this China-Russia blockade and establish a formidable security barrier. But the key to victory lies in technology. While Russian ships deteriorate, abandoned and relics of the past, China is arming this fleet with cutting-edge radar, satellite data, and drone capabilities. Military analysts warn this support borders on lethal aid, turning once obsolete vessels into modern combat platforms. Yet, this dependence creates a dark twist: Moscow's military brainpower is slowly bowing to Chinese control, risking a future where Russia's strategic autonomy is lost forever. How far will this technological handshake go? And could this alliance be the first step toward a global power shift? The story is only beginning to unfold, with silent battles beneath the icy surface.